Today, we're looking at a purple ink by Atramentis Jeanne d'Arc or Violet. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, if you like fountain pen ink reviews, I would invite you to subscribe. Also, if you're interested, you can follow me over on Instagram. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Jinhao 51A with a fine nib, wrote with it for a day, and used it to take the notes for this video. In order to standardize some of the writing sample, I always use Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Now, more papers are tested, and they'll show up a bit later. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, peppering of shading throughout. It's not huge, but it is certainly there. You look at the B in brown, the K in quick, the X in fox, it's definitely there, and 11 seconds to dry. The medium is just a hair lighter than the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen. The shading shows much nicer there. Look at what's going on in fox. It gets a nice mid-tone at the top, gets a little bit darker at the very bottom of the F, mid-tone back up, very dark onto the X. It's very nice shading going on here. 17 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both far left to far right do show color variation. The extra fine's harder to see on camera here, but it's definitely there in the writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 15 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 24 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we don't get any. And Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, peppering of shading, not a lot of it, but it is there, and we're going from a dark mid-tone to a dark tone. It's there, it's very subtle. Look at brown, it's very dark. In the second part of the W, much lighter. If you look at in quick, it's much lighter as we swoop out of the Q into the U. The starts lighter, gets darker. So there is some shading there. It's just not a lot. 12 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 18 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine, far left to far right, does show some color variation, and we do get spots of it. The medium shows none, and we got none. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this kind of greenish gray at the bottom, very strong there in how it's pushing up and how it's bonding while it's moving up the filter paper. So it's really wanting to get in there. And then we've got a very bright purple magenta leaning, but very bright purple that is a little magenta leaning at the top. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. That greenish gray, very there. It is not budging. None of it moved up to filter paper after that 10 minutes. And that magenta leaning purple, it moved its way up. There's a bit of water separation between these two inks, really showing how different they are. It does tell you which color you expect to be the hold-on. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I wouldn't use this in a note-taking situation because the purple aspect of this ink has an ability to really blow out like you're seeing in the lowercase h. And I just don't want to lose anything that I need to go back to. Now, water is lifting the purple part of the ink, but not the grayish green part. It is definitely staying there and not budging. Pen flush seems to just be beginning to break it up on the paper. When you look at those lower right side of that circle, it looks like it's beginning to break it up. Now, I did need to use pen flush to get this out of my pens, but I didn't have to go any farther than that. 1/3 bleach solution completely removed it from the paper, left it very clean, but you shouldn't need it to get that out of your pen. I test for viscosity or flow using a thing called a tilt test. I will link how I do that, the video of it, down below or up in the cards. I also then put it onto a standard distribution so it's more easily seen with all of the inks that I've tested. Now, for the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. The Atramentis Violet has a viscosity of 2.31, making it normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all of those. Now, for the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. The Atramentis Violet has an average dry time of 16 seconds, making it again normal. Instead of finding inks that look like the Atramentis Violet, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I wanted to go with a nice green, and I chose Diamine's Jade Green. The second writing sample is done on Life, Apica CD, and Franklin Christoph paper. Here we're looking at Life paper. Now we get no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, only a couple spots of shading that do show up, but if you look at the word brown, you see much more of it. You see it in Fox quite a bit, so it is there. 9 seconds to dry. Medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen. There is some shading that's going on. It's very, very subtle in what's around, but look at the LAZ of lazy compared to the brown above it. Very different tones. So we are getting some shading within the writing, very subtle to find it. 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both are showing us no color variation, although we do get it in the writing, even if a little bit. Apica CD notebooks. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does have shading spots. Look at brown, starts darker, gets lighter, gets darker. Same thing with quick, darker to lighter to darker. The goes from light to dark, over goes dark, light, It's nice here. This has been the nicest look for this ink has been on this paper. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, not quite as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading. Again, brown goes dark to light to dark. It's very nice. Over goes from lighter to darker. 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both does show us color variation, and we are getting it. It's the nicest one. Franklin Christoph paper. So I had spots where it was slightly darker as it was coming in and deeper into the page. So I put it as a minor on bleeding in that it's getting quite deep. Really no ghosting. I guess if you had a gusher, it would be a problem. This is perfectly good performance on the back of the page. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 5 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 7 seconds to dry. Scrubby of the extra fine shows us color variation, although we get none. Medium shows us none, and we got none. And that is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Atramentis Jeanne d'Arc or Violet? It was the Clairefontaine that really misinformed me in the beginning about this ink. It looked like it was going to be absolutely amazing constantly. And it looks amazing on Clairefontaine. If that's the paper you use, this is a great ink, but on other papers, I found it much less interesting. So what nib and pen give the best writing experience with this ink? A medium to dry flow, broad or medium nib puts down a nice tone that does allow for little bits of shading. And a wet pen really puts down a great tone on the page. I would go with a wet broad on Clairefontaine here. I'm going to remind you that I'm here every day with a new ink review. Thanks for watching.